The rain came without warning. One moment, Verity Ashford was watching the countryside roll past her carriage window, gray skies threatening but holding. The next, the heavens split open with a violence that made her gasp. Water hammering the roof so hard she could barely hear herself think. "Steady on, miss," the coachman shouted from above, his voice nearly lost in the downpour. "Road's washing out ahead." She gripped the seat, heart pounding, as the carriage lurched sideways. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could see nothing but gray sheets of water and the dark shapes of trees bending in the wind. They were miles from anywhere. Miles from shelter. Miles from anyone who could help if something went wrong. Something went wrong. A crack split the air, louder than thunder. The carriage jolted violently, tilting at a sickening angle. Verity was thrown against the door, her shoulder striking the wood hard enough to bruise. The horses screamed. The coachman cursed, and then, with a groan of splintering timber, they stopped. "Miss Ashford!" The coachman's face appeared at the window, rain streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Axles broken clean through. We're not going anywhere in this. What do we do?" She had to shout to be heard over the storm. "There's another carriage coming up behind us, miss. Saw it on the last rise. Maybe they can help." Verity's stomach dropped. Another carriage. On this road. At this hour. She knew, somehow, before the approaching vehicle even came into view. Knew it the way one knows a storm is coming. The way one knows bad news before it's spoken. The black lacquered carriage with silver trim, the matched gray horses, the crest on the door that she'd seen 100 times at her brother's side. The Blackwell crest. No, anyone but him. The carriage slowed, then stopped. A footman leapt down, umbrella in hand, and hurried to open the door. And there he was. Lord Theron Blackwell, Duke of Ashworth, stepped out into the rain, as if the storm were merely an inconvenience. Tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed in charcoal gray. His dark hair was immediately plastered to his forehead, but his expression remained exactly as she remembered it. Cold, controlled, utterly indifferent. His gaze swept over the broken carriage, the frightened horses, and finally landed on her. Something flickered in those pale gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or irritation. With him, it was impossible to tell. "Miss Ashford," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact, delivered with all the warmth of a coroner's report. "Your Grace." She refused to let her voice shake, refused to let him see how much his mere presence affected her. What an unexpected displeasure. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your axle is broken. How observant of you. You'll need assistance. I would rather walk. In this?" He gestured at the torrential rain, one dark eyebrow raised. "Don't be absurd." "I'm never absurd, Your Grace. Merely particular about the company I keep." The coachman was looking between them with growing alarm. "Miss, begging your pardon, but the nearest village is 5 miles on. You'll catch your death out here. Then I shall die with my dignity intact." "Miss Ashford," Theron's voice hardened. "Get in my carriage." "I decline. It wasn't a request, and I am not your subject to command." Lightning split the sky, thunder following so close that Verity flinched. The horses whinnied in terror. Rain pounded down even harder, if such a thing were possible, soaking through her traveling cloak, plastering her dress to her skin. Theron moved before she could react. One moment he was standing by his carriage. The next, he was beside her, his hand closing around her elbow with an iron grip. "You will get in," he said, low and dangerous, "or I will put you in myself. And I assure you, Miss Ashford, that would be far more damaging to your precious dignity than accepting a ride." She wanted to refuse, wanted to stand in the rain until she drowned, rather than spend another moment in this man's presence. But his grip was unyielding, and her coachman was watching, and somewhere beneath her fury, a small, practical voice reminded her that dying of pneumonia would not, in fact, improve her situation. "Fine," she spat. "But this changes nothing between us." "There is nothing between us to change." The words cut deeper than they should have. She wrenched her arm free and stalked toward his carriage, rain streaming down her face, fury burning in her chest. Inside, the carriage was warm and dry, and smelled of leather and something else, something distinctly him. Sandalwood and cedar. She hated that she noticed, hated more that some traitorous part of her found it pleasant. She pressed herself into the far corner of the seat, putting as much distance between them as the confined space would allow. Theron climbed in after her, settling across from her with infuriating composure. He pulled the door shut, muffling the roar of the storm to a dull thunder. Silence. She could feel his gaze on her, assessing, cataloging, and judging, just as his mother had judged her, just as all of them judged her. "You're shivering," he observed. "I'm fine." "You're soaking wet and it is freezing. You're not fine." "My physical state is no concern of yours." "It is when you're dripping all over my carriage." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Of course. Your precious carriage. How thoughtless of me to inconvenience you with my near drowning." "You weren't drowning. You were being stubborn. A quality I'm certain your mother finds deeply unsuitable." The word hung between them like a blade. Theron went very still, his eyes, gray as the storm outside, locked onto hers. "Miss Ashford, don't." She held up a hand. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. I've heard quite enough from your family to last several lifetimes." "I wasn't going to." "You were going to explain, or excuse, or worse, apologize without actually apologizing, and I am not interested in any of it." His mouth pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she thought he might argue, might defend himself, or his mother, or the entire aristocratic order that had deemed her unworthy of basic human decency. Instead, he turned to look out the window at the rain-lashed darkness. "The nearest inn is the Hound and Hart," he said flatly. "Another 3 miles. We should arrive within the hour, assuming the road holds. And then?" "And then, Miss Ashford, you will go your way, and I will go mine, and we need never speak of this again." If only it were that simple. The carriage rocked through the storm, and Verity stared at the man across from her, hating him with every fiber of her being. 4 years. She had known Lord Theron Blackwell for 4 years, ever since her brother Crispin had brought him home from Cambridge that first Christmas. She'd been 20 then, full of hope and romantic notions, convinced that the handsome, serious-eyed Duke's son was everything a hero ought to be. What a fool she'd been. That first meeting, he'd looked at her as if she were part of the furniture. Her brother had laughed and said Theron was simply shy, that he warmed up once you knew him. But 4 years of holidays and house parties and social events had taught her the truth. Lord Theron Blackwell did not warm up. He was ice all the way through, incapable of seeing anything beyond bloodlines and social standing. And his mother was worse. The Dowager Duchess Sonara Blackwell was legendary in society, though not for the reasons most would admire. Beautiful, elegant, and utterly ruthless, she had ruled her family with an iron will since her husband's death 15 years ago. It was whispered that nothing happened in the Blackwell household without her approval. No friendship formed, no alliance made, no marriage considered that did not meet her exacting standards. Standards that Verity Ashford, daughter of a merchant who'd made his fortune in shipping, could never hope to meet. She still remembered the moment with perfect, excruciating clarity. The Worthington Ball, 18 months ago. She'd been wearing her finest gown, ivory silk, with pearl embroidery that had cost her father a small fortune. She'd felt beautiful that night, confident, almost worthy of the glittering world around her. Then the Dowager Duchess had approached. Verity had curtsied, as was proper, heart racing with something like hope. Perhaps tonight would be different. Perhaps the formidable woman would finally acknowledge her as more than an unfortunate connection her son was forced to tolerate through his friendship with Crispin. Miss Ashford. The Dowager's voice had been perfectly pleasant, perfectly carrying. Half the ballroom could hear every word. How charming that you continue to grace these events with your presence. Though I confess, I'm surprised your family persists in putting themselves forward for society that clearly, she'd paused, delicately, finds them unsuitable. The word had sliced through Verity like a knife. Unsuitable. Not merely unwelcome or inappropriate or even unwanted. Unsuitable. As if she were a piece of furniture that clashed with the decor. As if her very existence were an aesthetic failing. And Theron had stood right there, 3 feet away, close enough to hear every syllable. He'd looked at her. She'd seen him look at her. And then he'd turned away. Said nothing. Did nothing. Let his mother eviscerate her in front of 200 people without so much as a murmur of protest. That was the night she'd stopped hoping, stopped pretending that his coldness was shyness, that his distance was reserve, that somewhere beneath that frozen exterior was a man worth knowing. The Duke of Ashworth was exactly what he appeared to be, a puppet dancing on his mother's strings, incapable of an independent thought or feeling. "You're staring at me," Theron said now, breaking the silence. "I'm contemplating all the ways I might murder you and dispose of the body." "Charming. You started it. I offered you shelter from a storm, hardly an act of aggression. Your existence is an act of aggression." He made a sound that might have been a laugh if he were capable of such a thing. "My existence? How dramatic," says the man who's never had to fight for anything in his life. His eyes snapped to hers, something dangerous stirring in their depths. "You know nothing about my life. I know you do everything your mother tells you. I know you've never once stood up for anything you believed in. I know you know nothing." The words were quiet, cold, final. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Verity turned to look out the window, watching lightning illuminate the darkness in brief and violent flashes. She thought about that ballroom, about the whispers that had followed her for weeks afterward, about her mother's tears and her father's quiet fury, and Crispin's helpless rage. He'd wanted to challenge Theron, to demand satisfaction, but Verity had forbidden it. What would be the point? The Dowager Duchess had spoken the truth, at least as society saw it. She was unsuitable, and Theron Blackwell had agreed. The Hound and Heart emerged from the darkness like a beacon. Golden light spilled from its windows, promising warmth and shelter, and most importantly, an end to this hellish carriage ride. But as they drew closer, Verity's heart sank. The stable yard was packed with carriages, horses, carts, every manner of conveyance, all crammed together in the small space. Stranded travelers, dozens of them, all seeking refuge from the same storm. "This doesn't look promising," she murmured. "No," Theron agreed grimly. "It doesn't." The carriage stopped. A harried-looking stable boy rushed forward, already shaking his head. "Sorry, m'lord. We're full to bursting. Storm caught everyone on the road. Ain't got space for another flea, let alone—" "We require rooms," Theron cut in, his voice carrying that unmistakable aristocratic authority. "Any accommodation will suffice." "That's what I'm telling you, sir. We ain't got—" The boy's eyes widened as he took in the crest on the carriage door. "Begging your pardon, your grace. I didn't realize. Let me fetch Mr. Harwick, sir, Right away!" He scurried off into the rain. Verity watched him go, dread pooling in her stomach. "Perhaps I should sleep in the carriage," she said. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm never ridiculous. I told you, I'm particular." Theron pinched the bridge of his nose. "Miss Ashford, I understand that you would rather endure any hardship than accept my assistance. But it is 30 degrees, raining sideways, and you are already soaked through. You will not sleep in a carriage. You cannot tell me what to do." "I can, and I will." Before she could argue further, the stable boy returned with a portly man in a stained apron. The innkeeper, presumably. Mr. Harwick was sweating despite the cold, his round face creased with worry. "Your Grace, such an honor, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Please, come inside, come inside. We'll find something, I'm sure of it." They hurried through the rain into the inn. Inside was chaos. Every table in the common room was occupied. Travelers pressed shoulder to shoulder, their damp clothing steaming in the warmth. The smell of wet wool, roasting meat, and unwashed humanity was overwhelming. Mr. Harwick led them through the crowd to a small alcove near the bar. "Now then, Your Grace, I won't lie to you. It's been a night, it has. Storm washed out the North Bridge completely. Anyone heading to Pemberton or beyond is stuck here until the waters recede." "How long?" Theron asked. "Days, maybe. Could be a week if the rain keeps up." Verity's stomach lurched. A week? Trapped here, miles from anywhere, with him. As for rooms, Mr. Harwick consulted a grease-stained ledger. "We're completely full, Your Grace. Every bed taken, every corner occupied. I've got families sleeping in the wine cellar, if you can believe it. Surely there must be something." "Well," the innkeeper hesitated. "There is one room, small thing, barely bigger than a closet, up in the attic. Single bed, shared washstand. I was saving it for emergencies." "We'll take it," Theron said. Verity's head snapped toward him. "We?" "One room, Miss Ashford. One room for both of us." "Absolutely not." "Then by all means, find your own accommodation. I'm sure one of those families in the wine cellar would be happy to make space." Mr. Harwick was watching them with undisguised interest. Verity felt her cheeks flush. This was impossible, scandalous, ruinous. And yet, she looked around the packed common room, at the families with crying children, at the farmers and merchants and travelers, all desperate for shelter, at the rain still lashing the windows with no sign of stopping. There was nowhere else to go. "Fine," she gritted out, "but you're sleeping on the floor." "Naturally." Mr. Harwick beamed. "Wonderful. I'll have it made up right away. Though, begging your pardon, but how shall I list you in the register? For propriety's sake." Verity opened her mouth. To say what, she didn't know. But Theron spoke first. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," he said smoothly. "We're traveling to my wife's family estate to share news of our recent marriage." The world tilted. Verity gripped the edge of the bar to keep from falling. Wife? He'd called her his wife. "Married!" Mr. Harwick's face lit up. "How lovely! Congratulations to you both. I thought there was something between you, I did. The way you were looking at each other when you came in." "Yes," Theron said, reaching for Verity's hand. She let him take it, too stunned to resist. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and utterly foreign. "My wife has a particular way of looking at me." "Murderous," she managed through clenched teeth. "The word you're looking for is murderous." Mr. Harwick laughed heartily. "Ah, newlyweds. Always sparring. My own wife couldn't stand the sight of me our first year. Now look at us, 30 years and counting." "Inspiring," Verity said flatly. "The room," Theron reminded him. "If you please." Of course. Of course. Right this way, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. He led them up a narrow staircase, then another, and finally up a ladder-like flight of steps to the attic. The room was exactly as promised. Tiny, cramped, barely large enough for the narrow bed pushed against one wall. A single window looked out onto nothing but rain and darkness. A stub of a candle guttered on the washstand. "I'll have supper sent up," Mr. Harwick said, "and extra blankets given the chill. Anything else you need, just ring." The door closed behind him. Verity and Theron stood in the cramped space, the bed looming between them like a battlefield. "Wife," she said quietly. "You told him I was your wife. Would you have preferred I tell him the truth? That the Duke of Ashworth is stranded with an unmarried woman in a room with a single bed? No, but then we maintain the fiction. One night. 2 at most. The storm will break, the bridge will clear, and we'll go our separate ways. No one will ever know. Your mother will destroy me if she finds out." Something shifted behind his eyes. "My mother will never know." "You can't promise that." "I can." He moved toward her, and suddenly the room felt even smaller. "I swear to you, Miss Ashford, that whatever happens in this room stays in this room. Your reputation will remain intact. And if someone recognizes you, no one here knows my face. I gave a false name. As far as the world is concerned, we're Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, unremarkable newlyweds caught in a storm." She stared at him, heart pounding. This was madness. Absolute madness. "And yet, one night," she said finally, "and you sleep on the floor." Agreed. But even as she said it, something told her one night would not be enough. That this storm had trapped them in something far more dangerous than a tiny attic room. That her life would never be the same. The room grew smaller with every passing minute. Verity stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the rain continue its relentless assault. Behind her, she could hear Theron moving about the cramped space, removing his wet coat, draping it over the single chair. The sounds were oddly intimate. Domestic, almost. She hated it. "You should change out of those wet clothes," he said. "Into what, exactly?" "My trunk is still in my broken carriage. I'll have someone retrieve it in the morning." "And tonight?" Silence. She turned to find him staring at the bed, with an expression she couldn't quite read. Resignation, perhaps. Or calculation. "I'll request additional blankets," he said finally. "You can wrap yourself in those while your dress dries by the fire." "You expect me to undress while you're in the room?" "I expect you to avoid pneumonia." His voice was clipped. "I'll turn my back. I'm not an animal, Miss Ashford. The jury is still out on that." But she was shivering violently now, her teeth chattering despite her best efforts to control them. The thin wool of her traveling dress clung to her skin like a second layer of ice. She could feel the cold settling into her bones. Pride, she reminded herself, was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not if she wanted to survive this night. "Fine," she said. "Turn around." He did, facing the door with military precision. Verity fumbled with the buttons of her dress, fingers numb and clumsy. The fabric peeled away from her skin reluctantly, leaving her in nothing but her shift and corset. A knock at the door made her yelp. "Blankets," came Mr. Harwick's muffled voice. "And supper, for the happy couple." Theron opened the door just wide enough to accept the items, blocking any view of the room's interior. Verity heard murmured thanks, the clink of coins changing hands, and then the door closed again. "Here." He held out a thick woolen blanket without turning. "Wrap yourself in this." She snatched it from his hand, cocooning herself in the rough warmth. It smelled of lavender and wood smoke. "You can turn around now." He did, and something crossed his expression as he took in the sight of her. Hair tumbling loose from its pins, bare shoulders visible above the blanket's edge, wet dress pooled on the floor, like a fallen flag. "What?" she demanded. "Nothing." But his voice was strange, rougher than usual. "You should eat something." The supper tray held bread, cheese, cold ham, and a small pot of what appeared to be mutton stew. Simple fare, but Verity's stomach growled at the sight. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. They ate in silence, sitting on opposite ends of the narrow bed, because there was nowhere else to sit. The stew was lukewarm and oversalted. The bread was stale. It was the best meal Verity had ever tasted. "Your coachman," Theron said eventually. "He'll be seen to?" Mr. Harwick said he'd find space in the servants' quarters. "Good." More silence. The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows across the sloped ceiling. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, the storm showing no signs of abating. "Why were you on this road?" Verity asked suddenly. "It's not the main route to anywhere." Theron's hand stilled on his bread. "I could ask you the same." "I was visiting my aunt in Millbrook. She's been ill." "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. You don't even know her." "I'm sorry that you were worried enough to travel in uncertain weather." His eyes met hers. "Is that acceptable?" She didn't know what to say to that. It sounded almost genuine. "Your turn," she said instead. "Why were you on this road?" "I was leaving." "Leaving what?" He looked away. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me. If we're going to be trapped here together, I deserve to know something about my supposed husband." A muscle twitched in his cheek. "I was leaving Ashworth House. My mother's estate." Running away from Mummy? The words were out before she could stop them, sharp and mocking. But instead of the cold dismissal she expected, Theron flinched, actually flinched, as if she'd struck him. "Something like that," he said quietly. Verity stared at him. In 4 years, she'd never seen him react to anything with genuine emotion. He was always controlled, always composed, always exactly what his mother expected him to be. "What happened?" she heard herself ask. "Nothing I care to discuss." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. "The floor will be too cold to sleep on. I'll take the chair." "The chair is barely large enough to sit in." "Then I'll manage." "Theron." His name slipped out unbidden. She'd never called him by his Christian name before. Never had reason to. He went very still. "Go to sleep, Miss Ashford." His back was to her, shoulders rigid. "We have a long day tomorrow." "What if the storm doesn't break?" "Then we'll have an even longer day." She wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, to understand what had happened at Ashworth House that had sent the ever-obedient Duke of Ashworth fleeing down a back road in the middle of a storm. But exhaustion was pulling at her, heavy and insistent. The warmth of the blanket, the fullness of her stomach, the strange security of knowing she wasn't alone in this tiny room. It was all conspiring against her. "Good night," she said softly. He didn't respond. She lay down on the narrow bed, pulling the blanket tight around her, and closed her eyes. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Theron's silhouette against the window, utterly still, watching the storm. And the last thing she thought was that he looked unbearably lonely. Morning brought no relief. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, but the sky remained an unbroken sheet of gray, and Mr. Harwick's grim report over breakfast confirmed their fears. The bridge was still impassable. The river had swelled overnight, sweeping away sections of the road. They were trapped for at least 2 more days, possibly 3. Verity received this news in the common room, sitting at a small table near the fire. Her dress had dried overnight, wrinkled but wearable. Her hair was pinned up as best she could manage without a proper mirror. She felt rumpled and out of sorts, and entirely unprepared for what happened next. "Miss Ashford?" She looked up at the sound of her name, her real name, and her blood ran cold. Standing before her, impeccably dressed despite the circumstances, was Lord Rafferty Vane. He was handsome, as he'd always been. Golden hair artfully tousled, blue eyes bright with interest, smile charming enough to melt butter. The second son of the Earl of Thornbury, he'd been a fixture of London society for years, always at the best parties, always surrounded by admirers, always saying exactly the right thing. She'd danced with him once, 2 seasons ago. He'd complimented her eyes and her wit, and then promptly forgotten she existed. Lord Vane, she managed. What a surprise. A delightful one, I hope. He slid into the chair across from her, without waiting for an invitation. Though I must confess, I never expected to find you here of all places. The Hound and Hart isn't exactly your usual establishment. The storm caught me on the road. My carriage broke down. How dreadful. His concern seemed genuine, though with Rafferty Vane it was impossible to tell. Are you traveling alone? Surely your family didn't allow— She's traveling with me. Theron appeared at the table, his voice cutting through Rafferty's words like a blade. He stood behind Verity's chair, one hand coming to rest on her shoulder with deliberate possessiveness. Rafferty's eyebrows rose. Ashworth, I didn't see you there. Evidently not. I wasn't aware you and Miss Ashford were acquainted. She's my wife. The words dropped into the conversation like stones into still water. Rafferty's expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then something sharper. Interest, perhaps, or suspicion. Your wife? He laughed, a little too brightly. Forgive me, but I hadn't heard any announcement. When did this happy event occur? Recently, Theron said. Very recently. How mysterious. Rafferty's gaze moved between them, assessing. And here I thought Miss Ashford was still unattached. I was rather hoping to remedy that situation myself. Verity's heart stuttered. I beg your pardon. I've been meaning to call on your father for months now. His smile was pure charm. Your brother and I have become quite friendly, you know. He speaks of you often. This was news to Verity. Crispin had never mentioned Rafferty Vane at all. How flattering, she said carefully. But as you can see— Yes, as she can see, Theron cut in. My wife is unavailable. If you'll excuse us, Vane, we were about to go upstairs. Of course. Rafferty stood, but his eyes lingered on Verity a moment too long. Though I do hope we'll have a chance to speak later. Mrs. Blackwood, was it? I confess I'm curious about this whirlwind romance. There's nothing to be curious about, Theron said flatly. No? A duke marrying in secret, without his mother's blessing? Without any announcement at all? Rafferty's smile didn't waver. That seems quite curious indeed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Verity felt Theron's hand tighten on her shoulder. Be very careful, Vane, Theron said quietly. What you imply. I'm not implying anything, merely observing. Rafferty sketched an elegant bow. Congratulations on your nuptials, Your Grace. I'm sure your mother is thrilled. He walked away, leaving a chill in his wake. Verity twisted to look up at Theron. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes were blazing. He knows, she whispered. He suspects. It's the same thing. No, it isn't. Theron's voice was tight. Suspicion is not proof. He can't prove anything. He doesn't need to prove it. He just needs to whisper. One word in the right ear, and he won't say anything. How can you possibly know that? Theron pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. For the first time, she noticed the shadows under his eyes. He hadn't slept, she realized. He'd spent the entire night in that tiny chair, watching the storm. Because Vane has his own secrets, he said quietly. Secrets he wouldn't want exposed. What kind of secrets? The kind that would end his welcome in polite society. His teeth clenched. Trust me, Miss Ashford. Rafferty Vane will not risk his own reputation to destroy yours. She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to believe that this fragile fiction they'd constructed could hold. But Rafferty's words echoed in her mind. A duke marrying in secret, without his mother's blessing? The Dowager Duchess. If she found out, when she found out. Stop! Theron's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Stop thinking whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking that your mother is going to destroy me. My mother doesn't know. She'll find out. She always finds out. She probably already knows. She probably has spies in this very inn, reporting back to her, Verity. The sound of her name, her Christian name, on his lips stopped her cold. He'd never called her that before, not once in 4 years. She doesn't know, he said, quieter now. And even if she did. He stopped, looked away. Even if she did what? Verity pressed. Nothing. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Why? His eyes snapped back to hers, suddenly fierce. Why does any of this matter to you? You hate me. You've made that abundantly clear. I don't. She stopped, confused by her own response. I don't hate you. You said my existence was an act of aggression. I was angry. You said you'd rather walk 5 miles in a storm than accept my help. I was very angry. Something shifted in his expression, something almost like vulnerability. And now? Now I'm... She searched for the right word. Confused. About what? About you. About why you're helping me. About why you care if Rafferty Vane spreads rumors about us when you've never cared about my reputation before. The words hung between them, sharp and accusing. Theron stood abruptly. We should go upstairs, before Vane decides to continue his interrogation. Theron, don't. His voice was raw. Please don't ask me questions I can't answer. He walked away, leaving her alone at the table with nothing but questions, and the unsettling feeling that everything she thought she knew about the Duke of Ashworth was wrong. She found him in their room, standing at the window again. It seemed to be his default position, facing the storm, back to the world, utterly alone. Why did you call me that? She asked, closing the door behind her. Call you what? Verity. You've never used my name before. His shoulders tensed. It slipped out. Things don't slip out with you. You're the most controlled person I've ever met. Then perhaps I'm not as controlled as you believe. She moved further into the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. What happened at Ashworth House? I told you, I don't want to discuss it. And I told you, we're trapped here together. If we're going to survive the next 3 days without killing each other, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. He laughed then, a harsh, broken sound that held no humor. What you're dealing with. You're dealing with a man who spent 32 years doing exactly what he was told. A man who never once questioned his mother's decrees, no matter how cruel. A man who stood in a ballroom and watched a woman be humiliated and did nothing because nothing was what was expected of him. Verity's breath caught. The Worthington Ball. Yes. He turned to face her, and his eyes were haunted. The Worthington Ball. You remember. I remember everything. His voice was barely a whisper. I remember the look on your face when she said that word. Unsuitable. I remember the way you held yourself together, chin high, refusing to cry. I remember wanting to... He stopped, his expression twisting with pain. Wanting to what? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Why? The word exploded out of him. Why does it matter to you what I wanted? What I felt? I didn't do anything. I stood there like a coward while my mother destroyed you, and I did nothing. Then why didn't you? She stepped closer, close enough to see the storm raging in his eyes. Why didn't you say something? Do something? If you wanted to. Because I was afraid, his voice cracked. Because my mother has controlled every aspect of my life since my father died, and I have never once defied her. Not when she dismissed servants who showed me kindness. Not when she drove away every friend I ever made. Not when she told me exactly who I would marry and when and why, and made it abundantly clear that any deviation from her plans would result in consequences I couldn't begin to imagine. Verity stared at him, heart pounding. This was more emotion than she'd ever seen from him. More honesty than she'd thought him capable of. What consequences? She asked quietly. My mother holds the family's finances. My father's will was unconventional. Everything passes through her until I marry someone she approves. If I defy her, she can cut me off entirely. The estates, the tenants, the staff, everyone who depends on the Blackwell name would suffer. That's monstrous. That's reality. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it disheveled. So yes, I stood in that ballroom and said nothing while she called you unsuitable. Because if I had defended you, if I had shown any sign of caring, his voice trailed off. Of caring, Verity repeated slowly. About what? He looked at her then, really looked, and what she saw in his eyes made her forget to breathe. About you. The words hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. You don't care about me, she whispered. You've spent 4 years pretending I don't exist. I've spent 4 years desperately pretending you don't exist. He moved toward her, stopping just out of reach. Because if I acknowledged you, if I let myself see you, really see you, I wouldn't be able to stop. Stop what? Wanting you. The confession was raw, painful. Wanting something I was never supposed to have. Someone my mother would never allow. Someone unsuitable, Verity finished quietly. That's not. He made a frustrated sound. That word has nothing to do with who you actually are. My mother uses it to control, to diminish, and to keep me in line. She called you unsuitable because she could see. He stopped abruptly. See what? That I watched you. At every ball, every dinner, every event where we were in the same room. She saw me watching you, and she knew. Knew what? That you were dangerous. His voice dropped. That you were the one person who could make me forget my duty, forget my obligations, forget everything I was supposed to be. Verity's heart was racing. Theron, don't. He stepped back, putting distance between them. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like there's hope. Like this could be anything more than a temporary arrangement born of necessity. His expression hardened. The storm will break. The bridge will clear. We'll return to our respective lives, and you'll find someone worthy of you. Someone who isn't shackled to a monster in silk and diamonds. Your mother isn't my concern. She should be. She's destroyed people for less than this. If she ever discovered that we shared a room, that I called you my wife, even as a fiction, he shook his head. She would make your life a living hell. Not just yours, your entire family's. I'm not afraid of her. You should be. Well, I'm not. Verity lifted her chin. I've been called unsuitable by the most formidable woman in England, and I'm still standing. I think I can handle a little social warfare. Something sparked in his expression. Admiration, perhaps, or wonder. You're extraordinary, he said quietly. Do you know that? I'm stubborn. It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. He reached out almost involuntarily and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, feather light. You deserve someone who can give you everything. A proper courtship, a public declaration, a life free from shadows and secrets. Maybe I don't want someone who can give me everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe I want someone who would give me anything, if he could. His hand trembled against her face. Verity, don't tell me what I deserve. Don't tell me what's practical or sensible or safe. She covered his hand with her own, holding it against her cheek. Just tell me the truth. One honest thing. For a long moment, he was silent. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the window. The candle flickered on the washstand. The whole world seemed to narrow to this single point in time. I've been half in love with you since the moment we met, he said finally. You had ink on your fingers and fire in your eyes, and you looked at me like I was barely worth noticing. And I thought. He laughed softly, painfully. I thought, there's someone my mother could never control. Someone real, someone alive. Tears burned in Verity's eyes. You never said anything. How could I? My mother had already marked you as unsuitable. If I'd shown any interest, she would have destroyed you completely. Driving you away was the only way I knew to protect you. So you let me hate you instead. Your hatred was safer than her attention. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. For every cold word, every dismissive look, every time I made you feel like you were less than extraordinary. A tear slipped down her cheek, caught by his thumb. What happens now? She whispered. Now. He pulled his hand away, and the loss of his touch was physical. Now. I do what I should have done 4 years ago. Which is, protect you. Properly this time. His expression hardened. Rafferty Vane will not speak a word against you. My mother will never know what happened here. And when this storm ends, you'll return to your life free and clear, with your reputation intact. And you? I'll return to mine. To your mother. To her control. To the marriage she's planning for you. He didn't deny it. Theron, you can't. Get some rest, Verity. His voice was gentle but final. We have a long day tomorrow. He turned back to the window, dismissing her as thoroughly as he ever had in a ballroom. But this time, she knew what lay beneath the coldness. This time, she understood. And as she lay down on the narrow bed, staring at his silhouette against the gray light, she made herself a promise. She would not let him sacrifice himself for her. Not again. Not ever again. She couldn't sleep. The confession played on a loop in her mind. I've been half in love with you since the moment we met. 4 years of coldness, of dismissal, of careful cruelty. All of it a mask. All of it protection. Protection for her. Verity turned on the narrow bed, watching Theron's silhouette in the darkness. He'd moved from the window to the chair at some point, folding his tall frame into the impossibly small space. His breathing was too even to be natural. He wasn't sleeping either. You're going to cripple yourself in that chair, she said quietly. I'm fine. You're lying. A pause. Then, softly. Yes. The bed is large enough for 2. Barely, but enough. That wouldn't be appropriate. We're supposedly married. It would be more inappropriate if someone discovered you sleeping in a chair. No one is going to discover anything. Theron. She sat up, letting the blanket fall around her waist. Please. You haven't slept in 2 days. You can barely keep your eyes open. Just lie down. I promise not to ravish you in your sleep. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. That's not what I'm worried about. Then what are you worried about? Silence stretched between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Myself. The word hung in the darkness like a confession. Verity's heart stuttered. I trust you. You shouldn't. Well, I do. So either you can sit in that chair and suffer, or you can accept that I'm a grown woman capable of making my own decisions. She shifted to the far edge of the bed, making room. Your choice. Another long pause. Then the chair creaked, and she heard him stand. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably. We'll regret it. Probably." The bed dipped as he lowered himself onto the mattress. He lay on his back, rigid as a board, keeping as much distance between them as the narrow space would allow. Which wasn't much. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that familiar scent of sandalwood and cedar. "Relax," she whispered. "I don't bite." That's not remotely comforting. But slowly, gradually, the tension began to drain from his shoulders. His breathing deepened. The rigid line of his body softened. "Verity." His voice was drowsy now, sleep finally claiming him. "Yes. Thank you. For what?" "For not hating me, even when I deserved it." She turned her head to look at him. In the dim light, with his guard finally down, he looked younger, softer, almost vulnerable. "I never hated you," she admitted. "I wanted to. God knows I tried. But I never quite managed it." His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "I'm glad." She should have pulled away, should have maintained the boundaries that propriety demanded. Instead, she held on tighter. "Go to sleep, Theron. Stay with me? I'm not going anywhere." He slept, and somewhere in the deep watches of the night, Verity slept too, her hand still clasped in his. She woke to warmth, not just the warmth of blankets or the lingering heat of the fire. Human warmth, solid and enveloping. At some point in the night, they'd shifted. Theron's arm was wrapped around her waist, her back pressed against his chest, his breath warm against her hair. She should move, should extricate herself before he woke, and the awkwardness became unbearable. She didn't move. Instead, she lay perfectly still, memorizing the feeling of being held, of being wanted, of being something other than unsuitable. His arm tightened around her. "You're awake. So are you. I should let go." "Yes." Neither of them moved. "This is dangerous," he murmured against her hair. "I know. If anyone found us like this, I know." His hand splayed across her stomach, warm through the thin fabric of her shift. "Verity, I don't." She turned in his arms, facing him. In the gray morning light, his eyes were the color of storm clouds. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't tell me all the reasons this can't happen. But it can't. I know that too." She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. He shuddered under her touch. "But just for this moment, can we pretend? Can we pretend we're just two people who found each other in a storm? Verity, please." His resolve crumbled. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. 4 years of denial and longing and desperate wanting poured into the press of his lips against hers. She kissed him back with equal fervor, fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. "We shouldn't," he gasped between kisses. "I don't care. Your reputation is already in tatters according to your mother." She pulled back just far enough to meet his eyes. "I would rather be ruined by you than saved by anyone else." Something broke behind his eyes. Something that had been holding him together for far too long. Verity. Her name was a prayer on his lips. My Verity. "Yours," she agreed. "For now. For this moment. Yours." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she lost herself in the sensation, his hands in her hair, his body pressing her into the mattress. The weight of him, solid and real, and finally hers. They didn't speak again for a long time. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I should feel guilty," he murmured. "I've compromised you completely. We've compromised each other completely." She pressed a kiss to his collarbone. "I believe that makes us even." It doesn't work that way. It works, however we decide it works." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I meant what I said. Before, about protecting you. I know. When we leave here, when the storm breaks, we'll deal with it then." She lifted her head to look at him, but not now. Now, we have this. Just this. It's not enough. No, she agreed softly. It's not nearly enough. But it was all they had. And as the rain continued to fall outside their window, Verity closed her eyes and let herself pretend, just for a little while longer, that the storm would never end. The storm broke just before dawn. Verity woke to silence, true silence, for the first time in days. No drumming rain, no howling wind. Just the soft gray light of morning filtering through the window and the empty space beside her where Theron had been. She sat up, pulling the blanket around herself, heart already sinking. He was standing by the window, fully dressed. His back was to her, shoulders rigid with the same tension she'd seen that first night. As if the last 24 hours had never happened. As if he hadn't held her, kissed her, whispered her name like a prayer in the darkness. "The bridge is passable," he said without turning. "Mr. Harwick just confirmed it. We can leave within the hour." Something cold settled in Verity's chest. "Theron, your trunk has been retrieved from your carriage. Your coachman is preparing your transport." His voice was clipped, professional, empty. "You should be home by nightfall. And what about you?" "I'll return to Ashworth House." The words hit like a physical blow. "Your mother's estate. Yes. After everything you told me, after what happened between us." Finally, he turned, and the look on his face made her want to weep. He'd rebuilt his walls, every one of them, higher and stronger than before, with no gap or crack for her to slip through. The man who'd held her through the night was gone, replaced by the cold, distant Duke she'd known for 4 years. "What happened between us was a mistake," he said quietly. "You don't believe that." "I believe it's the truth. We were trapped, emotional and vulnerable. We let ourselves forget reality." His mouth pressed into a hard line. "But reality hasn't changed. I'm still bound by my mother's wishes. You're still unsuitable in her eyes. And nothing that happened in this room changes any of that." "So what? You're just going to pretend it didn't happen?" "It's the only way to protect you." "I don't want your protection." She stood, clutching the blanket like armor. "I want you to fight. I want you to stand up to her for once in your life. I want—" "What you want is impossible." His voice cracked, just slightly before he regained control. "My mother has already chosen my bride. Lady Marguerite Ashby. The announcement will be made at the end of the season." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Verity's feet. "You're engaged?" "Not formally. Not yet. But the understanding has been in place for years. Our families have been negotiating the terms since I turned 25. And you didn't think to mention this? Before you, I tried to stay away from you." For a moment, something raw crossed his face. Every instinct told me to keep my distance. But then there was the storm, and the room, and you were right there, and I— He stopped, shaking his head. "I was weak. I let myself have one night of something I knew I could never keep. And now, we both have to live with the consequences." "The consequences of falling in love?" He flinched as if she'd struck him. "Don't. Don't what? Don't speak the truth? Don't admit that what happened between us meant something? It can't mean anything." His composure finally shattered. "Don't you understand? If my mother discovers what happened here, she won't just destroy your reputation. She'll destroy your entire family. Your father's business, your brother's prospects. Everything your family has worked for, gone in an instant, because I was selfish enough to want something I wasn't entitled to have. Verity stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. So yes, he continued, quieter now, I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm going to marry Lady Marguerite and fulfill my duty, and spend the rest of my life trying to forget what it felt like to hold you. Because that's what's required, that's what's expected, and that's what you deserve. Someone who can give you more than stolen moments and secret shame. I don't want someone else. You will, in time. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. The carriage will be ready in an hour. I suggest you dress. Theron, please. Goodbye, Miss Ashford. Miss Ashford. Not Verity. Not anymore. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Final. Absolute. Verity sank onto the bed, staring at nothing, feeling something vital shatter inside her chest. She'd been called unsuitable 100 times. She'd been dismissed and overlooked and undervalued by society at every turn. But nothing had ever hurt like this. Like being chosen and unchosen in the same breath. Like being told she was loved and unlovable at once. She dressed mechanically, fingers numb on her buttons. She pinned up her hair without looking in the mirror. She packed her small bag of belongings and walked down the narrow stairs to the common room, where her coachman waited with worried eyes. Theron was nowhere to be seen. His carriage was already gone, she learned from Mr. Harwick. Left at first light before anyone else was awake. He'd paid for her room, her meals, and her repairs. One final act of protection before he disappeared from her life. Your husband seemed in quite the hurry, Mr. Harwick observed. Everything all right between you two? Verity forced a smile. Everything's fine. We simply have different destinations. The lie tasted like ash on her tongue. Outside, the sky was clearing. Patches of blue appeared between the retreating clouds. The road stretched ahead, muddy but passable, leading her back to her ordinary life. A life without him. She climbed into the carriage, closed the door, and finally, let herself break. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of pretending nothing had happened. 3 weeks of smiling at her mother's questions and deflecting her brother's concern and lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, remembering the weight of his arm around her waist. 3 weeks of silence from the Duke of Ashworth. Then the letter came. Not from Theron, from Rafferty Vane. Dread pooled in Verity's stomach as she broke the seal, some instinct warning her that nothing good waited inside. My dear Miss Ashford, I hope this letter finds you well. I confess I've been thinking about our encounter at the Hound and Hart quite often since my return to London. Such a fascinating coincidence, finding you there with the Duke of Ashworth. Married, was it? How much unexpected. I've taken the liberty of making some inquiries. Discreetly, of course. It seems no one in society has heard of this marriage. No announcement, no ceremony, no record of any kind. How very mysterious. I mention this only because I remain, as I told you, deeply interested in your family's friendship. Your brother and I have grown quite close, and I would hate for any misunderstanding to damage our connection. Perhaps we might discuss the matter further. I shall be calling upon your father this Thursday to propose a formal arrangement between our families. I trust you will make the right decision. Your devoted servant, Lord Rafferty Vane. The letter fell from Verity's fingers. Blackmail. He was blackmailing her. Marry him, his words implied, or watch your reputation burn. She was still sitting frozen in the drawing room when Crispin found her. Verity? Her brother's voice was sharp with concern. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. She watched his expression change as he read. Confusion first, then dawning understanding, then fury so hot it seemed to burn the air around him. "That bastard," he breathed. "That absolute Crispin. I'll kill him. I'll call him out, and I'll kill him myself. You can't. Watch me. If you duel him, the scandal will be even worse. Everyone will know something happened." She pressed her hands to her face. God, what a mess. What an absolute disaster. What did happen? Crispin's voice was quieter now, though no less intense. At the inn, with Ashworth. Nothing. Verity. Nothing that matters anymore. She dropped her hands, meeting his eyes. He's engaged to Lady Marguerite Ashby. The announcement is expected any day. Crispin's expression changed. He's not engaged. What? I saw him yesterday. At White's. He looked like death warmed over, and when someone mentioned Lady Marguerite, he nearly took their head off. Her brother studied her face. What happened between you two? I told you. Nothing that... Don't lie to me. I've known Theron for 8 years. He's the most controlled man I've ever met. And yesterday, he was barely holding himself together. Crispin moved closer. What happened? Verity closed her eyes and told him everything. When she finished, her brother was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm going to kill him too. Crispin, he compromised you, left you to face Vane's threats alone, and is apparently planning to marry someone else while looking like death warmed over at his club. He shook his head. I'll kill them both, starting with Ashworth. He was trying to protect me. By breaking your heart? By keeping his mother away from me? Verity wiped her eyes. You don't know her, Crispin. The Dowager Duchess. I know exactly what she is. A manipulative harpy who's controlled her son's entire life. His expression hardened. But that's no excuse. Theron is a grown man. If he loves you, and it's abundantly clear that he does, then he should damn well fight for you. He won't. He can't. His mother holds all the power. Then we'll take the power away from her. How? Crispin smiled grimly. Leave that to me. Before she could respond, the butler appeared in the doorway. Miss Ashford, you have a visitor. Who is it? The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth. Miss. She's waiting in the front parlor. Verity's breath seized in her chest. Crispin's hand closed around her arm, steady and protective. I'll send her away. No. The word surprised her as much as him. No, I'll see her. Verity. If she's here, it means she knows, and hiding won't change that. Verity straightened her spine. Besides, I've spent 4 years being afraid of that woman. It's time I faced her. She walked to the parlor on legs that felt like water. The Dowager Duchess stood by the window, silhouetted against the afternoon light. She was beautiful, even now, silver-haired and elegant, dressed in deep purple silk. But her eyes, when she turned, were cold as winter ice. Miss Ashford, she said, how good of you to receive me. We have much to discuss. Your Grace. Verity curtsied, hating how her voice trembled. To what do I owe this honor? Let us dispense with pleasantries. The Dowager moved to the settee, settling herself with regal precision. I know what happened at the Hound and Hart. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Lord Rafferty Vane was kind enough to inform me. It seems my son spent 3 nights at a country inn with an unmarried woman, posing as husband and wife. Her eyes were razor sharp. Would you care to explain? There's nothing to explain. The storm trapped us. We made the best of difficult circumstances. By sharing a room? A bed? By protecting my reputation from worse scandal. The Dowager's laugh was like breaking glass. How noble? And I suppose the fact that my son has been completely useless since his return. Unable to focus, unable to sleep. unable to so much as mention your name without looking like he's been gutted. That's also explained by difficult circumstances? Verity said nothing. I've spent 32 years shaping my son into the man he was meant to be. 32 years of careful cultivation, strategic alliances, proper matches. And in 3 days, you've undone all of it. I haven't done anything. You've made him love you. The words were an accusation. Don't deny it. I've seen the symptoms before. My husband looked at me the same way, once, before he learned better. Perhaps your husband simply gave up, Verity said quietly. Perhaps love beaten down long enough simply stops fighting. The dowager's eyes flashed. You know nothing of my marriage. And you know nothing of my character. You called me unsuitable without knowing anything about me. You judged me based on my father's profession and my family's lack of title, without once considering that I might have value beyond my bloodline. Value? The dowager rose, drawing herself up to her full height. What value could you possibly offer a duke? What connections? What alliances? What political advantage? You are the daughter of a merchant. Your father made his money in ships. There is nothing you can give my son that he cannot find in 100 better matches. Except love. The word landed like a stone in still water. Love, the dowager repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. How quaint, how romantic, how utterly naive. Is it? Verity stepped forward. Is it naive to want something real? Something that isn't built on contracts and calculations? Your son has spent his entire life doing what he was told, being what you demanded, and sacrificing his own happiness for your ambitions. And what has it gotten him? A title, an estate, and a soul so starved for genuine connection that 3 days with someone who actually saw him, who actually cared about the man beneath the duke, was enough to undo 32 years of your conditioning. The dowager's face contorted. How dare you? No! Verity's voice was strong now, steady. How dare you? How dare you treat your own son like a chess piece? How dare you control every aspect of his life and then wonder why he's miserable? How dare you stand there and tell me I'm unsuitable when you have made him incapable of joy? I made him a duke. You made him a prisoner. The door burst open. Theron stood in the doorway, breathing hard, as if he'd run the entire way. His eyes found Verity first, sweeping over her with desperate intensity, then moved to his mother. What are you doing here? He demanded. Correcting your mistakes. The dowager's composure was cracking. As I always have. My mistakes? He stepped into the room, and Verity had never seen him so furious. You came here to threaten her? To intimidate her? Without my knowledge? Someone had to act. You've clearly lost all sense of, I've lost nothing. His voice was quiet now, dangerous. But you're about to. I beg your pardon? I went to see Father's solicitor this morning. The original will, not the version you've been showing me for 15 years. His expression hardened. Did you really think I'd never check? Did you think I'd go my whole life believing that Father left everything in your control? The dowager went very still. He didn't, did he? The estate, the income, the properties, they've been mine since I turned 25. That's 7 years, Mother. 7 years you've let me believe I was dependent on you, when Father gave me everything the moment I came of age. Theron, 7 years, controlling my life, choosing my friends, dictating my future, all based on a lie. I did what was necessary. You weren't ready. I wasn't compliant. He moved toward her, and for the first time, Verity saw fear flicker in the dowager's eyes. You knew that if I ever found out the truth, I'd stop bowing to your demands. So you kept me in the dark, kept me dependent, kept me alone. Everything I did was for your own good. Everything you did was for your own power. He stopped in front of her, towering over her slight frame. "It's over, Mother. I'm assuming full control of the estate. I'm ending the negotiations with the Ashbys, and I'm going to marry whomever I choose." "You cannot." "I can." He turned to Verity, and his expression transformed, softened, became something she'd only seen in the darkness of that tiny room. "If she'll have me." Verity's heart stopped. "What?" "I came here to find you." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I've been trying to stay away, trying to be noble, trying to protect you from her. But I can't. I can't spend another day pretending I don't love you. I can't marry someone else while my heart belongs to you. I can't." His voice broke. "Choose me," Verity whispered. "That's all I've ever wanted. Just choose me." "I choose you." He brought her hands to his lips. "I choose you today, and tomorrow, and every day after. I choose scandal and difficulty, and whatever hell my mother tries to unleash, because none of it matters. None of it compares to the hell of living without you. Theron, I love you, Verity Ashford. I've loved you for 4 years, and I'm done pretending otherwise." The Dowager made a sound of disgust. "This is madness! Society will never accept her. You'll be outcasts. Then we'll be outcasts together." Theron didn't take his eyes off Verity. "I've spent my whole life seeking your approval, Mother, trying to be the son you wanted. But you never wanted a son. You wanted a puppet. And I'm done dancing on your strings." He turned to face her one final time. "You can stay at the lower house. You'll have your allowance, your position, your place in society. But you will not interfere in my marriage. You will not contact Verity or her family. And you will never, never call her unsuitable again." The Dowager's face twisted with rage. For a moment, Verity thought she might scream, might lash out, and might do something dramatic and terrible. Instead, she drew herself up, gathered her dignity like a cloak, and walked to the door. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "Both of you." "No," Theron replied. "I won't." The door closed behind her, and Verity was in his arms, laughing and crying at once, being kissed and kissing back with all the desperate joy of a woman who'd finally found what she'd been searching for. "Did you mean it?" she gasped between kisses. "All of it? Every word? You'll really marry me? If you'll have me?" He pulled back to look at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Will you, Verity? Will you have me, with all my baggage, and my terrible mother, and my years of being too afraid to fight for what I wanted?" "Yes." She cupped his face in her hands. 1,000 times. "Yes." He kissed her again, and somewhere outside, the last of the storm clouds finally cleared. The scandal, when it broke, was spectacular. Word spread through London like wildfire. The Duke of Ashworth had defied his formidable mother and proposed to the daughter of a merchant. Society was divided. Some declared it the most romantic story they'd ever heard. Others called it a disgrace, a betrayal of everything the aristocracy stood for. Rafferty Vane tried to make trouble, of course. He spread whispers about the inn, about the shared room, about what might have happened during those 3 storm-bound days. But Crispin had done his work well. Within a week, Vane's own secrets, gambling debts, an affair with a married countess, and several highly questionable business dealings became public knowledge. He retreated to the continent in disgrace, never to trouble them again. The Dowager Duchess retreated to the Dower House as promised. She did not attend the wedding. She did not send a gift. But she also did not interfere, which was, perhaps, the greatest gift she could have given. Theron proposed properly on a Thursday afternoon in the Ashford drawing room, with Verity's parents and brother present. He got on one knee and asked permission first from her father, a gesture that made the older man weep. then turned to Verity with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Not my mother's mother," he clarified. "My father's. She was kind. She would have loved you." Verity said yes before he finished the question. The wedding was held 6 weeks later at the small chapel on the Ashworth estate. It was modest by ducal standards, only family and close friends. But it was beautiful. Verity wore ivory silk, simpler than fashion demanded, but perfect for her. Theron wore an expression of such naked joy that several guests had to look away, overcome. Crispin stood as best man. He threatened Theron only once during his toast, which everyone agreed showed admirable restraint. "You were right about him," Crispin admitted to Verity at the reception. Underneath all that ice, there was a man worth saving. "I didn't save him," Verity replied, watching her husband laugh at something her father said. "He saved himself. He just needed a reason. And you're the reason. I'm the reason he finally believed he deserved to be happy." The first year was not easy. Society required time to adjust. Some doors remained closed. Some invitations never came. But the doors that mattered opened, and the invitations that counted arrived, and slowly, gradually, the ton accepted what they could not change. The Duke of Ashworth had married for love. And the woman he'd chosen, the unsuitable, unacceptable, utterly inappropriate merchant's daughter, proved to be exactly what the Blackwell name needed. She modernized the estate. She championed causes. She bore criticism with grace and praise with humility, and wore her new title like she'd been born to it. Because, as Theron told her often, she had been. "You were always a duchess," he said one evening, watching her manage a room full of dignitaries with effortless charm. The world just hadn't realized it yet. The world thought I was unsuitable. The world was wrong. He pulled her into a quiet alcove, away from prying eyes. "I knew from the moment I met you that you were dangerous, that you could destroy everything I'd built, every wall, every defense, every careful boundary between who I was and who I wanted to be. And did I? Destroy it all? Completely." He kissed her forehead. "Thank God." Word reached them, eventually, that the Dowager had fallen ill. Theron visited, against Verity's expectations. He stayed 3 days, sitting by her bedside, saying things that had needed saying for 30 years. When he returned, his eyes were red, but peaceful. "She asked about you," he said quietly. "Asked if you made me happy." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you make me happier than I ever thought possible. That I wake up every morning grateful for that storm, that broken axle, that terrible inn with its single bed." He took her hand. "That choosing you was the best decision I ever made." "What did she say?" A long pause. Then, she said she was sorry for everything. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't enough. But it was something. A beginning, perhaps, where there had only been endings before. The Dowager died 6 months later. The funeral was small, dignified. Theron mourned properly, grieving not the mother she had been, but the mother she might have been in some kinder world. And life went on. 2 years later, Verity stood in the entrance hall of Ashworth House, watching rain streak down the windows. Not a storm this time, just a gentle autumn shower, turning the garden silver and gray. Behind her, she could hear laughter from the drawing room, Crispin teasing Theron about something, her mother fussing over arrangements for dinner, her father discussing shipping routes with anyone who would listen. Family. Her family and his, merged into something new, something whole. Wool gathering again. She turned to find Theron watching her from the doorway. He looked different now than he had that first night in the carriage. Softer, warmer, as if 4 years of ice had finally melted, leaving behind the man who'd always been hidden underneath. Remembering, she corrected. The rain made me think of it. The storm. The inn. The room. She smiled. The bed. He crossed to her, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. Ah, yes. The bed. Barely large enough for one person, let alone two. And yet we managed. We more than managed. His lips brushed her ear. I still maintain it was the most uncomfortable night of my life. Liar. You've told me at least a dozen times it was the best night of your life. Both can be true. She laughed, leaning back into his embrace. Do you remember what you said that first night, when you told the innkeeper we were married? I remember everything about that night. You called me your wife before I was your wife. I knew, even then. His arms tightened around her. Some part of me knew that you were it, the beginning and the end, the only woman I'd ever want, even though I was unsuitable, especially because you were unsuitable. He turned her in his arms, cupping her face with both hands. You were unsuitable for the life my mother planned, but you were perfect, absolutely perfect, for the life I needed. She rose on her toes to kiss him. Flatterer? Truth-teller. From the drawing room, Crispin's voice called out, If you two are quite finished being disgustingly in love, dinner is served. Coming, Verity called back. But neither of them moved. 2 years, Theron said quietly. Sometimes I still can't believe it. Believe what? That I almost lost you. That I almost let my mother's voice be louder than my own heart. He shook his head. I was so afraid, Verity. So convinced that loving you would destroy everything. And instead, it built everything. He gestured at the house around them, at the warmth and light and laughter spilling from every room. This isn't the life my mother wanted for me, but it's the life I always needed, the life I never thought I could have. You could have had it sooner. I wasn't ready sooner. I needed the storm. I needed to be trapped, cornered, forced to confront what I'd been running from for years. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I needed you. You have me. I know. His smile was radiant. That's the miracle, isn't it? After everything I did wrong, after all the years I spent being too afraid to fight for you, you're still here. You still chose me. I'll always choose you. She echoed his words from that rain-soaked parlor when he'd finally found the courage to fight. Today and tomorrow and every day after. Even when I'm difficult? Especially when you're difficult. He laughed, a real laugh, free and joyful, and pulled her into one final kiss before they joined the others. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house had fallen quiet, Verity stood at their bedroom window, watching the rain continue its gentle fall. Theron came up behind her, wrapping her in his arms. What are you thinking? He murmured. That some storms are worth weathering, and some unsuitable women are worth fighting for. She turned to face him, this man who had been her adversary and her ally, her tormentor and her treasure. This man who had spent 32 years under his mother's thumb and had finally broken free. I love you, she said. Have I mentioned that today? Only 7 times. Then I'm falling behind. She pulled him toward the bed. Let me catch up. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But inside Ashworth House, there was only warmth and light, and the quiet certainty that some loves, the real ones, the fierce ones, the ones worth fighting for, could weather any storm.